Hoey is the director of the Democracy Index at The Economist. Joan and her team have been publishing democracy scores for every country in the world for almost 20 years. And Julie Kane is the CEO of Democracy Investments, an asset management firm using The Economist's Democracy Index. So welcome, Joan and Julie.
Thanks.
Great to have you here. Joan, let's start with you. What trends are you seeing in democracy? What are some highlights from your most recent feature?
Okay, so the index is a retrospective on the year just gone, so 2023, and we create the index at the end of the year, published at the beginning of this year. The trends is unfortunately one overall of regression in terms of the global average index score, which fell to 5.23 from 5.29, but the number of democracies actually increased by two, so two countries moved up the index. I would say that most of the regression is taking place among the non-democracies. So actually, that's what accounts for a lot of the decline in the score. So what we're seeing is authoritarian regimes, hybrid regimes becoming more entrenched. Yes, more entrenched. And the decline in the scores, the average score for democracies, was pretty modest. As it happens. So it's not all doom and gloom.
Okay, I was going to say, I think we have this sense of, oh my goodness, democracy is going away, but it sounds like it's steady.
Well, what we're seeing is this kind of bifurcation or polarization between the democratic world. But yes, things are going in the wrong direction among the kind of hybrid regimes. These are countries which have elements of formal democracy, but also elements of authoritarianism. And instead of progressing towards the democratic camp, they're going in the other direction, and the authoritarians are becoming, as I say,
more so.
Yes.
What do you attribute that to? Is there an economic element to this that are making countries more authoritarian? I mean, any kind of analysis?
Yes, I think the authoritarian regimes have learned how to do what they do better. So they, in terms of managing their populations. I think the pandemic, they use that as an opportunity to roll back civil liberties insofar as there were some. Obviously, war and conflict is actually driving a lot of the regression. So we see, especially in Africa, where there was a big rollback in terms of electoral process and pluralism, electoral democracy. There's been a series of coups across the Sahel and Western Africa. That's accounted. Now we see war in the Middle East, and obviously the Russia-Ukraine war. Yeah. If we look at what's happened to Russia and its score in recent years, it's become much more pronounced, moving much more towards dictatorship, even worse than authoritarianism. So yes, and obviously it's difficult for Ukraine in these circumstances to maintain democratic standards in the circumstances of an existential war.
Yeah, very interesting. Julie, what inspired you to work with the Economist Democracy Index?
We believe the Economist Democracy Index is the most robust measure of democracy in the world. Joan and her team have done an outstanding job of publishing the index. There are 60 different indicators that go into every country score, and it's really quite robust. So when we set out to create an alternative strategy, currently in the asset management industry, international index funds are over allocating to authoritarians, and that is not good for democracy. So we wanted to, when we were able to agree on our partnership to use the data, that allowed us to create a strategy that helps grow and protect democracy.
Okay, what are some of those 60? You don't have to name them all.
Yeah,
but maybe
Sure.
Some of your favorite ones to look at.
So because we're incorporating that index with an all-world ex-US index, we are overweighting in countries that have a strong electoral process, a strong functioning of government, high political participation, a good political culture, and protecting civil liberties.
And why is it important that countries like that get money from investors?
Passive international index funds are lowering the cost of capital for authoritarians. And we want to do the opposite. We want to see democracies grow. So let's hold every country accountable to their country democracy score and lower the cost of capital for democracies so that we can help them grow as opposed to the alternative.
Because I feel like sometimes we're putting money into our enemies'
Exactly.
whatever weapons or something that Joan, what are projections looking forward? Do you feel like this trend, or are we it feels like we're kind of at a tipping point that we could go more Democratic or less so, depending on how things play out over the next few years?
Yeah, well, this year, of course, is a huge election year. It's actually
huge, not just in the US, but yeah.
No, everywhere. So globally, in fact, countries that represent more than half the population of the world are going to the polls this year. Many have gone to the polls already, some of the world's biggest democracies, and also some of the world's biggest authoritarian regimes as well. So, it's quite, and that's something to be celebrated. This is since the start of the universal franchise. This is the biggest electoral year, so that's great. And as long as we have elections, there's always the possibility of things going in the right direction. Obviously, things can go in the wrong direction. So our index is not about, it's a retrospective, as I say. It's trying to look at the state of democracy in more or less every country in the world. In the previous year, but it does obviously point to some likely trends, because we look, as Julie said, in great detail at the state of the electoral process and pluralism, whether elections need to be free and fair, they need to be competitive, there needs to be an opposition that can contest and so on, to make the change in a positive direction. So there are pointers there, and unfortunately, this electoral process and pluralism is one of the categories where there's been some regression, quite a lot of regression in recent years. So it's in the balance.
So we'll see. So, Julie, you've been around 3 years, right? The
Yes.
investment index. What's the performance been like over that time? What do you feel like you've accomplished?
Well, thank you for asking that, Jane. Yes, we just passed our 3-year mark, and we earned a 3-star rating from Morningstar. And the index that our ETF tracks, ticker symbol DMCY, has outperformed the MSCI All World Index by 6%. Mm-hmm. So we're really glad to see that democracy wins, and our investment thesis that democracies will outperform over the long run has been enforced.
And people can invest in this. They can just buy it like through a brokerage firm with the ticker symbol?
DMCY.
Okay, awesome. Where can people find out more about the Democracy Index that The Economist puts together?
Okay, this is we publish this as a free white paper. EIU.com is where you can find it. Just go to EIU.com or Google search Democracy Index EIU.
Okay, easy enough. Thank you so much, Joan and Julie.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.